homeless community has won a significant victory over Mayor Hancock. There will now need to be a week's notice before the city does homeless sweeps, moving people and their belongings out of public spaces. Advocates for the homeless sued the city, saying the sweeps were to make way for developers.
In time past, they have came by and just swept you that morning, no notice, no nothing. So, and then you scrambling to try to get a lot of your stuff, and then you're moving so fast that you forget what is more important, and you leave it, it gets on the way, so that way, I think it will benefit everybody.
I think that the notice will be more detailed and provide greater notice than we'd had before. We also provide.
Along with the advance notice, the settlement requires that the city store people's stuff for 60 days instead of 30. The city is going to add 200 storage lockers along with additional trash bins downtown, and will also put in needle disposal boxes in parks. Our look last night at a ballot issue coming up in May in Denver that would allow people to camp in public spaces prompted a number of Next viewers to ask if other cities have managed to deal with homelessness more effectively. Our Steve Steger gathered up your emails and your suggestions for this closer look.
What works and what doesn't work? You don't have to look too far from Denver for examples of both. Many of you suggested we look straight west.
After a decade-long initiative, chronic homelessness in Utah has now dropped to an unprecedented low.
Yes. In 2017, Utah reported 163 chronically homeless persons, down from nearly 2,000 12 years before.
As an observer, Salt Lake City made a huge investment in housing and services to get people off the street into housing, and they saw dramatic reductions in the number of people experiencing homelessness.
Housing First was the name of the program, which got homeless individuals into housing and then got them into services like counseling and substance abuse treatment. But in the years since, the numbers of chronically homeless in that state have nearly doubled again.
It's my understanding that that funding kind of tapered off. And as the funding tapered off, the services were no longer there, the subsidies for housing were no longer there, and the new housing was no longer coming online.
Kathy Alderman with the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless says that underscores a key problem this country has with helping the homeless. Even when we do throw money at a problem, we only do it in the short term.
But a short-term project can't give you long-term results unless you continue to invest.
Colorado could learn from other states, she says, like Portland, where the city has invested in a different kind of shelter, one that bundles a whole lot of services along with giving people a place to stay.
We need a sustained strategy, we need sustained investments, and we need a political will.
So consider the Utah example again. Their task force on homelessness involved in that housing program estimates it costs about $20,000 a year to care for a homeless person on the street, between ER visits, time at the shelters, jail time, and everything else. To house someone for a year and connect them with a caseworker only cost that state about $8,000. So a significant difference in cost, Kyle, and that's part of what Kathy Alderman from the Colorado Coalition is saying, that if you make the investment and it starts to work, the only way to keep it going is to continue to invest in it.
That said, the size of Salt Lake City's homeless population cannot compare to Denver's.
Yes, it can't. 91% of that decrease, especially in 10 years, was just incredible.
Size of the problem here is very different.
It
All right,
is.
Steve,
Much
thank
different.
you. There was an incredibly important congressional hearing in Washington, D.C. today, and most Americans, most Coloradans, didn't see it. They were watching that Cohen show. In another room at the Capitol, a sparse crowd and a couple members of Congress were also talking about truth and consequences. The media avoided that hearing like the plague, which is somewhat appropriate considering it was about America's measles outbreaks.
Thank you very much, both of you, for being with us today and clearing up some of these myths.
Denver's Democratic Congresswoman Diana DeGette chaired the hearing full of empty chairs, where America's health experts talked measles, while the sparse audience jeered.
Can measles vaccine cause encephalitis? The vaccine?
The vaccine, no.
There's no cases of
there is in normal.
Chair will remind all persons in the audience that manifestation of approval or disapproval of proceedings is in violation of the rules of the House.
A top doc from the CDC noted that anti-vax parents have been vaccinating when measles shows up in their communities.
In the current outbreak in Clark County, Washington State, we've seen a huge upsurge in acceptance of vaccine and use of vaccine in the community. When faced with the real threat of measles, Parents weigh that same equation and realize it's better to vaccinate. What we need to do is get those messages to parents before the measles outbreak hits.
The head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases practically pleaded with Americans not to let immunization levels drop.
When you go below a certain level and that umbrella of herd immunity lifts, it truly is a catastrophe waiting to happen. So that's something that would be very scary to think about.
The audience did not want to hear it, and not many outside this mostly empty room had the chance.
Colorado has one of the lowest vaccination rates in America. Yesterday here, we heard from a Democratic state rep who wants to make it tougher for parents to opt out. Governor Polis opposes that, or to use DeGette's language, he offered a manifestation of disapproval. We can stop the competition for the worst named political event of all time because Denver Mayor Michael Hancock has won. Kickback with Hancock. Yes, that is the actual name of his town hall event. Nothing like putting another word for bribe in all caps in the name of your event. I thought this was a joke the first time I saw it. No way. Not in a city with a bid rigging scandal at the convention center and payouts to people in close proximity to the mayor's misbehavior. No, surely they would not put a headline on an event that screams, "Take me down to Bribey Town." But no, they did. Kickback with Hancock. March 28th, mark your calendars. The mayor's office says Kickback with Hancock is harmless slang used by the millennials who named the event. It's just about hanging out, they said. So do not show up with a roll of hundreds to slip into the mayor's hand. That would be super awkward. Jared Polis ran for governor, promising to reduce the cost of health care. We are still too cheap to get the jingle voice, leaving me to tell you that one of Polis's promises was debated at the Capitol today. Here is that promise from the State of the State.
A reinsurance program for the highest cost cases is a proven solution to reduce health care costs. It's worked in other states. It's one we should embrace in Colorado to save small businesses and individuals money.
Did I know what reinsurance meant this morning? I did not. It essentially is providing insurance for insurance companies. You're thinking, how does that save me money? I'm not an insurance company. No, you're not. But politics guy Marshall Zellinger explains.
Here's how reinsurance in Colorado would work. Instead of insurance companies and consumers paying a medical provider for coverage of a high claim, a state fund would be created with federal dollars to help insurance companies pay for those high claims on the belief that insurance companies would lower the cost of premiums for the consumer. At the same time, the state would limit how much the medical provider would be allowed to be reimbursed for the medical services.
By taking those more expensive medical claims out of the pool, we're able to lower the risk for all of the other lives and bring down insurance premiums.
State Representative Julie McCluskey is sponsoring the bill that Governor Jared Polis believes will fulfill a Polis promise and lower insurance and health costs.
I don't think I met a single person anywhere in the state in my campaign for governor that said I'm paying too little on health care.
Unfortunately, the bill as currently drafted puts the whole cost of this on hospitals, and we don't think that hospitals should be the only ones to bear the burden of this program.
The Colorado Health Association is against the reinsurance bill, at least as it reads today, because there's no guarantee insurance companies will lower your premium, despite hospitals receiving less.
Payments to hospitals and other healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, physical therapists, and others will be cut without any of our direct costs also going down.
Addressing how much each healthcare service actually costs, that's for another bill. This one deals with how those services will get paid.
We are bringing down how we are paying for the services that are delivered by our providers and by our hospitals.
A few notes. This could save money for people who buy insurance off the exchange, people who buy it on their own, not through an employer plan. And where would the federal money come from? That's a little complicated, but if you're lower income, there's a federal tax credit you receive to help you pay your premium. But if this bill works and your insurance premium becomes cheaper, the money from that tax credit will instead go to the state and then filter to the insurance companies. Kyle.
You know, Marshall, they say that we should not tackle complex topics on the TV news because people don't like that.
My head hurts, but I thought in that first 20 seconds you might have grasped it.
You should know it. It's important stuff. And if the end goal works and it saves people some money, there you go. All right. Thank you, Marshall. George Washington High School in Denver was going to let parents opt their kids out of attending a Black Heritage Month assembly. You can imagine how that went over. The high school correctly pointed out that it has this same opt-out policy for all of its assemblies. But after today's dust-up about that assembly, Students will now be required to attend any school assembly on history, culture, and current events.
It's been 10 years since Denver lost the Rocky Mountain News.
I still have my Rocky Mountain News ID card.
Tonight, we look at what exactly was lost for those who write, those who read, and those who just want someone watching people in power. She left a well-known band to write an album about a topic we've covered on Next.
I was a bit worried because it's something a little bit strange.
Nah, people love strange. That's next.
Halfway through the week, and how about that fog today and that cold air? So pretty, but so unpleasant to drive in and just be outdoors in. And the fog still kind of hovering over downtown Denver tonight. But with a wind shift, not only will we be warmer tomorrow, I think we'll have less fog and less cold air. Some of that will scour away, but there's a storm coming in for the weekend. Tomorrow will be our mild, dry day here in Denver with the snow ramping up in the northern mountains. We do have a winter weather and travel advisory that'll go out for areas like Steamboat and Vail Pass. Lower elevations, fog now, skies will clear, clouds build back in tomorrow afternoon, and we've got a few light snow showers expected Friday with accumulating snow late Saturday into Sunday. Partly cloudy overnight, our low 24, some areas of fog early east and then warmer, drier, high 52. Mid 40s on Friday with late day snow showers, light accumulating snow Saturday, and the potential for 3 to 6 inches of snow late Sunday into Monday with bitter cold temperatures. Sunday, high temperatures in the teens with morning lows maybe below zero, Kyle.
Kathy, thank you. It was 10 years ago today that the people who are working to keep the Rocky Mountain News alive in this city learned that that institution was going to close. One final edition, then they'd all lose their jobs. 9 Wants to Know investigator Kevin Vaughn was one of those 200 journalists.
I went to work at the Rocky Mountain News in the fall of 1997. It was my third newspaper job out of college. In the mid-2000s, the world started changing for newspapers, and the Rocky was no exception.
We're going to announce just in the next few minutes that we're going to put the Rocky Mountain News up for sale.
We were, I think, 55 days from our 150th birthday, and it was just surreal that we were told, you know, at noon 10 years ago that the next day's paper would be the last paper we'd ever produce.
Good morning. We won't take long. We want to answer your questions. Tomorrow will be the final edition of the Rocky Mountain News.
There were people, you know, I think in just stunned silence. There were people like me that needed to hold on to something, and what I needed to hold on to was a notebook. So I had a notebook in my hand and was taking some notes about what was going on. There were people that were in tears. It was devastating. There's no other way to explain it. It was devastating. And as I look back on it now, I still regard it almost like a death. We knew it was coming for a long time in our hearts, and when it got made official, that's what it felt like. It's hard now to believe it's been 10 years since that day because it feels like it was yesterday. The next day, the paper was out, and we had to come in and we had to turn in our computers and our cell phones.
You all did everything right, but while you were out doing your part, the business model and the economy changed.
I think the death of the Rocky and what has gone on at the Denver Post and other news organizations has taken a tremendous toll on Denver. There are fewer people sitting in city council meetings and in courthouses pulling documents and figuring out how public officials are spending money and making decisions. There's a lot of great journalism still happening, but the fact of the matter is there were 200 people 10 years ago that were part of telling the stories of this city that lost their jobs, and many of them never worked in journalism again. And that's sad to me.
Many of the journalists who worked at the Rocky will be getting together for a little reunion in the next couple of weeks.
I'm gonna climb on board and let that iron horse take me away.
She was one of the voices in a well-known band. Then this singer from Colorado went solo.
The stories of women are kind of under the radar.
Took a risk and created an entire album inspired by one wild woman. That's next.
We love weird. You love weird. Normal's so It's kind of normal, you know? There is an artist from Aurora who sees life like we do. She left a famous rock band so that she could share a story about a woman written about in Colorado history.
This song is called Train. You know, I think we all know about Annie Oakley and maybe Calamity Jane, but there's not a ton of stories written about women of the West. And so I thought this was a story worth sharing. My name is Neal, Erik, and I'm a Colorado native, and I'm a musician. I just put a record out January 18th. It's called Rattlesnake. It's a concept album based on the life of Colorado hometown hero Rattlesnake Kate. And she was a woman who became notorious in the 1920s up in northern Colorado near Greeley in Hudson, Colorado, for this very strange encounter with a rattlesnake migration. And in order to protect herself and her 3-year-old son, she proceeded to kill 140 rattlesnakes and lived to tell the tale. It was really fascinating to see the kind of woman she was, which was a woman who was very fearless and who said what was on her mind. And I think she just felt a little bit out of place as that kind of woman, especially at that time period, because she really pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be feminine, and you know, really was truly her own boss. Yeah, I spent the better part of a decade playing with a band called the Lumineers that's based out of Colorado. Last fall, I stepped away and started to pursue my own solo project. It could sound crazy and delusional to some people to leave something. I mean, we were playing Madison Square Garden, and you know, we played for President Obama a couple times, but it was time to move on. Up at dawn. I was so ready to start having more of a voice and feeling a little bit more in control of my own destiny. As you kind of write through this mask where these songs are about her life, but I think on a bigger sort of, maybe the themes behind the record, they're very much about my own personal stuff, and I hope for other people that listen to it, you know, those who feel marginalized, and especially for young women, I hope it helps them find a voice a little bit, because that's what I felt like in writing this record. I found my voice.
Neal is hitting the road this spring, and she will have dates in Colorado. You can see her full performances from this afternoon on the next YouTube channel. It is a sign that there are always rules, even when somebody tells you there are no rules. That and your feedback next. It's a sign that no boundaries does not necessarily mean no rules. Renee Gould snapped this photo for us walking through the Denver airport. Right next to the no alcohol sign, no boundaries. Yeah, guess which one they're going to point to if you carry a drink outside that place. Share the signs you see with us. Use the hashtag HeyNext or send it to next@9news.com. So many comments tonight about the Rocky Mountain News, an institution which closed in this city a decade ago today. Sylvia Laybourne Meredith says Rocky was the best paper in the U.S. I miss it to this day. My mother used it to teach me to read, and I read it every day before school and work. Jenny writes in with a note about Kevin Vaughn, who worked at the Rocky until that last day and now works in our investigative unit. Jenny says, I've been very impressed with and thrilled to see Kevin Vaughn's transition from print journalism to also being a broadcast journalist, requiring such different skill sets. She says, I'll always remember his award-winning piece on the bus crash in Greeley. I bet a lot of Rocky readers remember that series. The Crossing, that is one of the finest pieces of journalism you will ever see. We're lucky to have him here. See you next time.